Yes, if you use long double variable, you can handle the larger numbers, such as, for an example, 99,999,999. Likewise. So earlier, very short number. Now, if you using this double data, long double data type, you can deal with larger numbers. So that's the idea behind this. So same principle applies for the integers, but it's the integers can hold only mm, whole numbers. So again, if it is an int, standard range. So long int, the larger number you can deal with. So unsigned mean only positive values. Long int means you can deal with very large numbers, like that 99 million thing. So if it is unsigned, again you are having only positive values, no negative value. Short int means the range is reduced. Sometimes you need to reduce the numbers that you are going to deal with. So basically short int supports from minus 65,000 to positive or plus 65,000. So the short int can handle any value in between those two limits. So if it is unsigned, it can only handle positive values from 0 to 65,000. Okay, so that's from our previous lesson. I will move into the current lesson, right? So we already discussed that we need a variable name and a data type. So because of there's a data type restriction, you should be careful when using variables, because you need to have the proper data type based on your problem. So if you use integer type data, where you should apply fractional numbers, so your final answer will be incorrect. Therefore always use the appropriate data type. So if it is a problem that always generate integer data, you can just use integer data type. Okay, moving on. So this is the RAM of your computer. I'll take a pointer. Okay, so this is the RAM of your computer. So these are the memory chips, right? So each memory chip hold set of cells or the locations that you can save data. So what happens is, if we declare a variable, if we command the computer to have a variable, it will kind of book a place for that particular variable. We don't know what is the exact location, but arbitrary it will lock or book a location for us. So based on the variable type, if it is an integer, the dedicated location will accept integer values, so it can temporarily hold integer type data. Same thing happens if it is float type variable, so it will again have a dedicated memory location and it will accept float type values. and there are thousands of other memory locations which are utilized by other programs that running in your computer, right? So this is the basic idea behind, or the lower level idea behind variables. Okay, now let's see how to define a variable. Now the thing is, in C programming language, before you use a variable, you have to define it, or you have to declare it, you have to set it. But there are some other programming languages that you don't need to declare variables. You can just use variables. But we are not going to discuss that type of programming language, as we are using C programming language. So in C programming language, you must always declare the variable, or you have to define that variable before you use that particular variable. So how to declare a variable? Very simple. You have to give the data type and the name of that variable. So this is a float type variable. Name of this variable is total. So if we now let's say this particular cell is named as total. So now if we want to access this particular memory location, or this cell, or this variable, we can use his name. Now we have defined the name is total. Now this cell will be the total cell. So this variable is known as total, so we can call him by using his name, right? So that's very easy. So it's like a basket with a label on it. So now this is the basket. Name of this basket is total. So if I want to do something with this basket, I have to call upon by that basket's name. What's the name? Total. So if I call name total, now computer knows this particular location. So it will deal with this particular location. That's how it happens. Okay. But there are some precautions that you have to take, right? When naming a variable, when giving a name to the variable, there are some reserved words in C programming language. So you can't use those words as a variable name because they are already reserved by the C programming language. So there are restricted names. You can't use any name just as your variable name. And the other thing is, you can't start the variable name by using number. Let's say you can't use a variable like 0 total. So 0 TOTAL, that is invalid variable name. You can't use that type of variable name because the variable name started with a number. You can't start a variable name by using a number. And in a variable name, you can't have any spaces, special symbols like $mark, @mark, spaces, commas, dots. Those special symbols you can't use. Only the underscore is allowed. You can use underscore in a variable name. Okay. Now those are the reserved words, or the restricted words that you can't use them as a variable name because they are keywords in C programming language. Right. So let's look at the C data types. Now earlier in the previous practical, this char part was also hidden, but today we have another type named char. So char variables are non-numerical data types. So they can hold characters, names, labels. So let's say if you need to store your name in your computer program, so you can use a char variable. We know in our name there's no numerical value. Let's say Kamal. So it's not a numerical value, so we have to use a char type variable to hold that particular data. If you are going to use that type of data in your program, which are non-numerical, just characters, so labels, names, let's say names, so you have to use a char type variables. So at the moment we are not going to use that type of variable. So we are basically focusing on float and integer type variables. And there's another special type named void. So that type is actually not numerical or non-numerical. It's kind of null type variable. We will look at that type also later on. So for the moment we will use float and int. So we already know that how float behaves and how integer behaves, and what are their variations, like double, long, short int, long int, like this. And in C programming language there are some other advanced data types also, right? Like arrays, pointers, like this. So in our scope we are not going to discuss about those user defined and derived data types. We will discuss about them later on. So moving on. So this is a C program with variables. So this is a simple program to solve the problem to find the sum of 5 plus 3. But in this case we are not just using those mathematical constants, the 5 and 3. Instead we are using two variables, num1 and num2. So inside the num1 we have the value 5. Inside the num2 we are having the value 3. So inside our output or the cout statement we are doing the calculation. So as I mentioned earlier, before you use the variable you have to define them, declare them. This is the variable declaration. We need two variables, so I have declared them separately. Int, this is the data type, it represents integer. The name of variable is num1, and again int type variable. The name of that particular variable is num2. So you can't have variables in common names.